I'll help her with the parts she's stuck on. Like this? When she types on the keyboard, the program starts as expected. Exactly. I snap my fingers in excitement. Alright. Let's move on to the next. Suddenly, her hand touches mine. I haven't asked your name yet. Startled by her sudden question, I get flustered. Oh, me? As I try to evade the question, she was. My name is John. I'm 34 years old. I was going through visitor procedures at the reception of a manufacturing company's headquarters. The receptionist seems to be informed and looks at me with a knowing glance. Escaping that gaze, I quickly finish the procedures and head to the CEO's office via the elevator. After talking with President Michaels, I was given permission to look around the floors, so I decided to casually explore each one. Everyone looks my way, but because I'm wearing a mask due to allergies. But I have on a visitor badge, so they only give me a quick glance. Thinking I'm someone's guest. Everyone is working seriously. One department is smoothly communicating, chatting amicably while still working efficiently. Another department seems busy and focused, working intensely on their computers. I mentally note the characteristics of each department. On the third floor, I felt a sense of unease for the first time since coming to this company. This department was the type to work intensely on their computers. The sign read IT department. They must handle the company's system-related tasks here. Among those silently working on their computers, the source of my unease was near the window. I approached and spoke to the person there. What are you doing? The woman I spoke to flinched and turned to face me. She was a petite woman. I'm making flowers out of paper. As she said that, she glanced behind her. I also looked in the direction she indicated. There was a sign with the company's name on it. We have an event soon to promote our products to clients. The sign is plain, so I thought I'd decorate it to make it more eye-catching. I understood what she was doing. But my unease remained. Are you doing this alone? It would be faster with a few people. To avoid disrupting the tense atmosphere, I asked her quietly. She looked troubled. I don't have any work I can do right now, she said, dejectedly. I frowned. Glancing at her name badge, I saw it read IT Department, Sarah Johnson. While the rest of the IT team seemed busy on their computers, why did she have no work? Seeing my silence, she explained further. I transferred here from a regional branch, but the programming language used here is different, and with the event coming up, there's no time to teach me. It was clear that we should avoid idle chatter during work hours. She seemed to understand that too, keeping her explanation brief, but I got the gist of it. What language do you use here? Her answer reassured me. In that case, I can help. How about I teach you after work? At my suggestion, she vigorously shook her head. No way. I can't impose on someone from another company like that. She seemed to have misunderstood because I was wearing a visitor badge. Oh, no, I'm actually from this company. I just returned from a branch office and I'm on a week's leave. I came to the office today for some paperwork. There's no problem with me teaching a colleague, right? I said this with a smile, though I wasn't sure it was visible through my mask. She looked down and shook her head. No, it would be a burden, and during your break. I hesitated, thinking it might seem too pushy, but I couldn't leave someone in need. I'm enjoying my time off during the day, so I'm free at night. But if you don't need help, that's fine. Though it looks like you really want to work. She looked up at me, startled. Then, with trembling lips, she managed to say, as long as it's not too much trouble. I would appreciate it. Her hesitant reply showed she was still unsure. I smiled gently and nodded. All right, after work, do you know the community center nearby? There's a study room there. Her eyes widened at my suggestion. Since she didn't say anything, I continued. Do you know the place? I'll be there reading for the rest of the day, so if you want to learn, come by after work. With that, I left the floor. It hasn't changed much, or maybe it's gotten a bit older? I stood in front of the community center, lost in thought. I had spent a lot of time here since I was a student. It had a large library and study rooms divided into private cubicles, with rooms for group study next door. Though you weren't supposed to be loud, small conversations for teaching were fine, making it a user-friendly place with quite a few regulars. During this time of year, just after the start of the new school term, the study rooms weren't crowded. Before exams, it would get so busy that finding a seat was a challenge. Exam season. I felt a pang of nostalgia. Back in college, I once tutored a middle school girl. It was only a few sessions, but I remember how fun it felt, like being a teacher. While she worked on problems, I mostly saw the top of her head since she was hunched over her notebook. I remember how amusing it was to see her tearful face when she couldn't solve something, and her bright smile when she succeeded. She kind of reminds me of that girl today. The woman's name was Sarah. The expression on her face as she made those decorative flowers reminded me of that middle school girl. Her petite stature was also similar. Feeling nostalgic, I forgot about reading and sat idly, reminiscing in a corner of the community center. I'm not sure how long I was lost in thought. The door opened, and a familiar figure in a uniform hurried in. "Sarah?" When I called out, she looked around and smiled when she found me. Her quickly changing expressions were charming. We moved to the study room for group learning, and she bowed slightly. "Nice to meet you again. I'm Sarah. Thank you for helping me." I nodded with a smile as she opened her laptop and pulled out a stack of reference books from her bag. I had picked out some books in the library, but they didn't seem necessary. "You're really working hard on your own." She looked troubled at this. "Self-study has its limits. I thought it would be like this. There are many programming languages in the world. Broadly speaking, they can be divided into two categories: compiled languages and scripting languages. Compiled languages execute programs faster but are more complex. You could say they're machine-friendly. In contrast, scripting languages are easier for people to understand but aren't as fast." Since she primarily used scripting languages, the compiled language used by our company's IT department was completely unfamiliar to her. I feel so pathetic. I was so excited about this transfer to the headquarters. "But it's like going to France with just a basic A1 level DELF certificate," she said. I almost laughed at the analogy. But I responded, "No, scripting languages are respectable programming languages. It's not like having an DELF certificate. It's more like being fluent in Japanese or Chinese but struggling in France." When I gave this comparison, Sarah laughed. "Still, you're amazing, Sarah. I heard you improved the efficiency of the main system at the factory with a scripting language. And that system got adopted at other factories too." As I said this, she furrowed her brows. "Did I tell you the details of why I was transferred to the headquarters?" Her question made me a bit nervous. "Oh? No, I just guessed that since you transferred from a branch to the headquarters IT department, you must have done something impressive." My awkward response only made her more suspicious. Panicking, I reached for her reference book. "Well, let's get started. Where are you stuck?" She still looked skeptical but shifted her focus to the book. She had reference books ranging from beginner to advanced levels, but she had already mastered the basics on her own. She seemed to be stuck somewhere in the intermediate section, so I began to help her with the troublesome parts. So like this?" When she typed on the keyboard, the program ran as expected. "Exactly." I snapped my fingers in excitement. "All right. Let's move on to the next." Just as I was about to move on to the next section, she touched my hand. I looked at her in surprise, and she was wide-eyed. "I haven't asked your name yet." Startled by her sudden question, I became flustered. "Oh, me? I'm John. Nice to meet you." Before I could continue, she shook her head vigorously. Seeing my confusion, she whispered softly, "John Michaels, right?" I was taken aback as she said this, my eyes widening in response. She looked at me with teary eyes. You once helped me with my studies here." The moment she said that, I vividly recalled the middle school girl I had been thinking about earlier. When I was in college, I was almost about to graduate and was preparing for my next step. It was a path I didn't want to take. I had always wanted to be a teacher. However, due to family circumstances, my future was already decided. Sighing, I was absent-mindedly reading a book with the necessary knowledge for my future job in the study room. Then, I heard the sound of someone sniffling next to me. Being allergic myself, I thought it might be allergies, but it seemed different. Pretending to go to the restroom, I peeked and saw a girl in a uniform slumped over her desk. "What's wrong?" I was surprised but spoke to her softly. She slowly lifted her head and turned a tear-streaked face toward me. Her expression was so distraught that I couldn't laugh. "I don't get it." There was a math workbook open on the desk. It seemed she was preparing for her high school entrance exams. My mouth moved on its own. "Would you like me to help?" She widened her tear-filled eyes. "Eh?" I scratched my head. "If you want, I can teach you. I think I can handle middle school math." She made a very skeptical face. "Does that mean this is so simple for you? Is math going to get even harder?" I laughed at her worrying about the future when she was struggling with the present problem. "Let's start with solving this problem first." But she hesitated. "But, you came here to study too, right?" "I don't want to take up your time." I chuckled at being considered by a middle schooler. "It's fine. I can do this anytime. You seem to need help right now." At my words, she nodded so quickly it made me laugh again. "After that, you helped me a few more times, and I managed to pass my exams and even went into a science path." I connected the face of the middle school girl I remembered with Sarah's face now. Indeed, they were the same person. "Even with your mask on, there was something familiar about you." It was an unforgettable memory for me. The way you snapped your fingers when I understood something that confirmed it for me. As she smiled gently, my face grew warm. "But, how did you know my name? We didn't exchange names back then, did we?" She laughed softly. "And then? Let's step outside for a moment. It's hard to concentrate on studying now." We were the only ones in the study room. But she was right, it didn't feel like the right atmosphere for studying anymore. We moved to the park next to the community center and sat on a bench. The breeze felt pleasant. "As for how I knew your name, don't think I'm weird, okay? Back then, the book you had with you had your name on it. I memorized it and later wrote it down in my notebook. John Michaels." Hearing her formally say my name made my heart skip a beat. "I always wanted to thank you. After our last meeting before my exams, I never saw you again. Even after I entered high school and then college. I occasionally came to this community center hoping to see you, but we never crossed paths. So, thank you very much for back then." Her deep gratitude made me flustered. "Oh no, I'm just glad you passed. Sorry for disappearing. After that, I got a job overseas." She nodded quietly at my explanation. "Sorry if this is presumptuous, but the name Michaels, that's the same as our company's CEO's surname, could it be?" Seeing her struggle to ask, I decided to come clean. "Yes, I'm the next in line to be CEO." She gasped a little but then smiled warmly. I knew it. All my hard work wasn't in vain. I didn't understand what she meant and looked puzzled. I was surprised to hear the name Michaels at the induction ceremony. It's not a common name. So I thought it must be related to the person who helped me at the library. I was assigned to a branch factory. But I always wanted to meet you again in work at the headquarters someday. It may seem trivial, but that was my motivation. My heart was pounding loudly. But no matter how much I checked the company newsletter or executive lists, I couldn't find your name. I scratched my head at her words. I'm still just an employee. I wanted it that way. Sarah tilted her head in confusion. But, you knew about why I got transferred to the headquarters because you're the next CEO, right? I nodded. Yeah, I saw your work. It was impressive. It's a bit embarrassing to know you did all that to meet me again. I laughed lightly. And I've come this far, encouraged by your words. She tilted her head further, frowning slightly. Her puzzled expression made me laugh again. When I was in college, teaching middle school Sarah math, I was also feeling uncertain about my own future. My grandfather had forged his own path, and my father was merely following in his footsteps. I wondered if I was destined to follow the same path as my father. One day, I couldn't help but ask her, "What do you think about a life where you just follow the path laid out for you?" She looked puzzled at the question. Of course, she would. She was still a middle schooler, after all. I felt foolish for asking such a question to a child. "Sorry, never mind." "Forget I asked." I tried to brush it off. But then she said, "Just riding on a track could be boring, but..." I leaned forward, curious about what she'd say next. "If you're the one driving, it can be fun." Her unexpected words made me ask further. "Even if you can't choose the destination yourself?" She pondered for a moment before smiling. "But you can choose how fast you go and when you arrive, right? You can change that as much as you want." It felt like a light shone on me. "And someday, you might be able to stop the train and add more tracks yourself, right?" I had never thought of it that way. "Because I'm starting to like math thanks to you." I thought I'd never be able to handle science, but this feels like adding more tracks, right? Her bright smile almost brought me to tears. "Yes, even if you're on a predetermined path, you can still drive it yourself. The final destination is set as CEO. However, I can choose the journey." With that realization, I negotiated with my father, the CEO, and my grandfather, the chairman, to train at a new factory we were establishing in Southeast Asia. Not only did I intend to train, but I also aimed to make that new factory one of the top factories in our company. And so, 12 years later, I returned to the States, having achieved top levels of production and quality at the Southeast Asia factory. Hearing my story, Sarah blushed deeply. Middle school me, how embarrassing. Did I really say that? I chuckled. Don't call it embarrassing. Those words have been precious to me. When I said that jokingly, she looked startled. "Oh, right, I'm sorry." She bowed slightly, and I thought she was such a good person. Without thinking, the words slipped out. "I think I like you, Sarah." It had only been a few minutes since we reunited. I had no idea what I was saying. She looked just as shocked. "What?" I carefully chose my words. "We haven't seen each other in a long time, but we met before. You were so earnest and adorable as a middle schooler, and now, seeing you work so hard to decorate a sign and study programming even when you don't have a job to do." "Oh, sorry. I didn't even ask if you have a boyfriend." I spoke quickly, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I don't have a boyfriend, but what about you, John? Do you have someone? You seem quite experienced with women." I was surprised and shook my head. "What? No way. I didn't even have a girlfriend while I was working overseas." Admitting this made me feel a bit pathetic, but it was the truth. "But, do you normally confess so quickly?" She gave me a skeptical look, and I scratched my head. "Honestly, I'm surprised myself. I might be getting carried away. I just never thought I'd see you again." The girl who was nearly in tears while I taught her. At my words, she pouted. "That nearly in tears part is unnecessary." She pursed her lips but glanced at me. "I've never been able to forget you either. I wanted to see you again, but you're the next CEO, right? And I'm just..." Before she could finish, I interjected softly. "Please don't call me that." She looked at me, eyes wide in surprise. "I'm running on a predetermined track, but I'm doing it as an employee by my own choice. While my end goal is to become CEO. I want to experience love and interactions as a regular person, not as the CEO. I don't want you to be fixated on my title as CEO. I want you to see me for who I am." Hearing this, she apologized again. "I'm sorry. I just thought someone like me wouldn't be enough, but I've always had feelings for you, the person who kindly taught me math. So I'm happy." "Yes." She remembered me and kept striving. I hesitantly spread my arms. "So, can we be together?" She blushed slightly but stepped into my arms. "Yes. I always wanted to see you again. Thank you for making math fun back then." With her in my arms, I thanked her too. "Thank you. I actually wanted to be a teacher. For that short time, I got to be a teacher and have a lovely student, which made me happy." As I hugged her tightly, she chuckled. I still need you to teach me about programming languages. She looked up at me and said, Teacher, I'm counting on you. I couldn't help but hug her even tighter. 1 month later, I introduced Sarah to my family. She thought it was too soon, but there was no choice. An arranged marriage had been planned for me. My retired grandfather had arranged it immediately after my return, and I nearly fainted when my mother told me, We're not deeply involved yet. But I'm sure of one thing. I will marry Sarah. In just 1 month, I've grown to love her more and more. She's already become irreplaceable to me. But my grandfather is intimidating. Honestly, he's quite scary. Still, I have my own will. Sarah, completely tense, is sitting next to me. I will protect her and stand by my own resolve. With that determination, I faced my father and grandfather. I don't approve it. My grandfather's first words were blunt. The woman I've chosen for you is from a distinguished family. An ordinary girl doesn't match up. I'll find someone suitable to support you. I looked straight ahead. I don't want to marry someone just because we're a good match. I don't need someone to support me. I want to marry someone we can mutually respect. My grandfather snorted. Respect? Then tell me 100 things you respect about this girl. I widened my eyes and looked at Sarah. Well, she's kind, hardworking, her crying face, her determination to create work where there is none. I continued listing what I respected about her. At some point, Sarah flinched, but I ignored it and kept going. My grandfather's eyes widened, and he eventually stopped me. That's enough. Enough. I don't want to hear it anymore. He frowned, but my father was trying to hold back his laughter. I smiled wryly. When I was in college, I was still uncertain. I thought about running away from this house and the future of becoming the next president many times. My words made my grandfather's eyes widen. But, during those times, Sarah's words saved me. Even if you're on a set path, you can steer it with your own will. As she said, I went to a factory in Southeast Asia and learned how to manage the factory, how to communicate, the basics of management, investment in equipment. I learned a lot and have been running towards becoming the president in my own way. Without meeting her, even if I didn't run away, I think I would have spent my days idly. For some reason, Sarah's eyes widened at my words. That's not true. Even without my words, you would have realized something and worked hard on your own. My words were just a trigger. She spoke passionately and then took a deep breath. But I also want to stay with you, who always looks forward no matter the situation. I don't just want to support you. I want to run on the track together with you. Looking directly at my grandfather, Sarah appeared divine. My grandfather was silent for a while but then suddenly stood up and left the room. When Sarah and I exchanged glances, my father smiled wryly. He probably sensed your growth. I did too. His unexpected words made my eyes widen. The arranged marriage talks haven't progressed at all, so I'll put a stop to them. I married your mother through an arranged marriage. And we're happy. His words made me a little flustered. No, it's not that arranged marriages are bad. As I panicked, my father laughed. I know. But, you seem to be using me as a cautionary example. Please, also see the good points? Hearing that, I felt a bit ashamed of myself. My father is a gentle and kind person who runs straight on the track laid out for him without complaint. Now, I understand how difficult that life was and how much he had to suppress himself. I respect you for disciplining yourself and running straight on the track. It was embarrassing, and I couldn't look him in the eye when I said it, but he smiled gently. And then, a few years later, Sarah and I got married. At the same time, I took over as CEO. For a while, my father will serve as chairman and support me. After consulting with him, I began to focus on the personnel restructuring that had been in progress for several years. When I returned to the US and toured the office, I noticed a stark difference between departments that were overworked and those that were relaxed. I decided to allocate more staff to the overworked departments to give them some breathing room. By doing this, I believe job satisfaction and interpersonal harmony will improve. I also want to ensure that new employees, like Sarah once was, aren't left overwhelmed and neglected. Although I wanted to enjoy newlywed life for a while, Sarah soon became pregnant. It's a boy. I felt a bit of a dark cloud. This child already has a predetermined path. How will he feel about such a life? Will he think he shouldn't have been born? Sensing my anxiety, Sarah sat next to me. It'll be okay. He will find his own answers. Besides, there's no need to insist on hereditary succession, right? She was right. My grandfather would disagree, but in today's world, we need to be flexible to keep up with the times. For now, my priority is to make it easier and more fulfilling for our employees to work. And to ensure that Sarah and our child are happy. I want to run on this track with all my might in my own way. Hey, I made you the manager, and this is what I get? Last month, I let it slide because you just took over. But this month's numbers are also down compared to last year. Do you know what happens if your performance is worse for 2 months in a row? Michael, the division head, said this to me. I'm sorry. The new Castle Electronics store opened 2 months ago and it's closer to the station, so we've lost a lot of customers to them. When I explained this, Michael responded, I know that. What's with the excuses? This is why incompetents are useless. The store James is managing is far from the station, which is a disadvantage. Our store is also smaller. And Castle Electronics has been advertising aggressively. Of course, we need to address this as a company. So putting all the responsibility on James is unfair. Daniel, the section chief, came to my aid. But Michael dismissed him. Are you guys trying to pass off your responsibilities onto the company? What's the point of your title and salary? The store's poor performance is entirely the manager's responsibility. It means you're incompetent. I thought, if that's the case, then the overall poor performance of the division is the division head's responsibility, right? But I couldn't say that out loud. Also, our company's salary is quite low, and we have unpaid overtime. Michael's arguments didn't make sense to me because being told to work hard for such low pay was not convincing. Would it be easier if I just accepted it and think that I just need to work harder? Is it wrong for a salaried employee to question their boss? While I was mulling over these thoughts, I heard something shocking. So, James, you don't need to come in tomorrow. You're fired. I couldn't believe my ears for a moment. I could feel the other store managers in the room freezing up as well. As Michael said this, Daniel tried to intervene again. Come on, Michael, that's too much. James understands he needs to improve the numbers, so let's leave it at that. Daniel said, trying to defuse the situation, but Michael replied, What are you talking about, Daniel? I never joke. James is fired as of today. The rest of you, if you don't want the same fate, you better raise your numbers. That's the end of the manager's meeting, and he left the room. I'm James, 35 years old. I'd been with TKD Electronics, a major electronics retail company, for 10 years. Because I graduated only from a technical school, I wasn't hired as a full-time employee and instead worked as a part-timer for a long time. It was only 2 years ago that I finally became a full-time employee. Since my student days, I was an introvert who preferred talking about shared interests with a few friends over socializing with the whole class. I thought I wasn't suited for jobs that required strong communication skills. So I chose to go to a technical school for programming instead of university. I liked working alone on a computer, so after graduation, I looked for jobs in system management and development and found a job posting for my current company. During the interview, I was told it was a hands-on company, so after being hired, I started working as a store staff member. I was told that after gaining experience on the ground, I would be moved to a suitable department. So I expected to work in the store for about a year before moving to a systems department. However, 2 years passed, then 3, and I was still a store staff member. Moreover, there was no sign of being promoted from part-time to full-time employee, and that situation also remained the same for 2. Then 3 years. Despite repeatedly asking my superiors about a transfer during contract renewals, they didn't listen. Hearing this story, one might think I should have changed jobs sooner. But I had a reason for sticking with it for 10 years. My struggle with communication improved because I had to reluctantly deal with customers at the store. In a workplace with intimidating seniors, where sales numbers are everything, you have to use your talking skills to get the customer in front of you to buy the product. There were individual sales targets, and failing to meet them meant getting scolded. Initially, I couldn't sell anything on my own, but with practice, I gradually got better at it in my second and third years. Being able to sell meant my talking skills had improved. Thanks to my job, I could now talk to various types of people, unlike in my private life where I struggled with conversations beyond close friends. I even ran into an old classmate in town who remarked, "James, you've become more outgoing." So, I decided to work hard at my job until I could transfer to a system-related department where I excelled. Then, 2 years ago, I finally got promoted to store manager. I should have been happy, especially since I became a full-time employee, but I was also anxious. Initially, I was assigned to a store with good location and easy sales, and both the section chief and division head were reliable mentors. So I worked hard with a sense of purpose. But things went downhill when I was transferred to my current store. The store is far from the station, in a bad location, and a new Castle Electronics store has just opened near the station. As a result, we lost even more customers to them, making it a challenging store for me to manage as the new manager. Despite the challenges, we worked together to try various strategies to boost sales. However, there were limits to what I could do as a store manager. And it was difficult to come up with strategies that could turn things around under such unfavorable conditions. "James, it's a tough store, but let's do our best together." Daniel, whom I trusted, always encouraged me, and I motivated myself to work hard every day. The division head, David, was also someone I trusted, like Daniel, but my luck ran out as he was replaced at this critical time. A new division head, Michael, who was 5 years older than me, took over, and suddenly the pressure on me increased dramatically. Other store managers are working hard, so what are you doing? Do you even realize you're in charge of a store? Oh. And I heard you didn't go to college. No wonder you can't hit the numbers. That's why technical school grads are useless. Michael would say this to me at every opportunity. He would say this in front of my juniors, so some of them would sympathize with me, saying, "Michael is really harsh," while others would gossip. Did you know James only went to a technical school? Daniel knew how tough Michael was on me and often encouraged me. However, Michael outranked him, so there were many things Daniel couldn't do to help. I tried to keep myself motivated. However, the numbers at a store with such bad conditions didn't improve quickly. 2 months after being transferred to the current store, I attended the monthly managers' meeting at the head office conference room. Feeling gloomy, thinking, this month's sales were far from the target, so I'm probably going to get scolded by the division head. I opened the door to the conference room. I arrived very early, so no one else was there yet. I took my designated seat and waited for the other store managers, Daniel and Michael, to arrive. Once all the store managers and Daniel had arrived, it was time for the meeting to start. Under Michael's leadership, the meeting involved each manager standing up in turn to report their sales and issues, receiving feedback on the spot. When Michael entered the room, everyone stood up quickly, and the meeting began under a tense atmosphere. Each store manager reported their monthly sales in turn. Since we were going in seating order, my turn was last. After listening to everyone else's reports, it was finally my turn. Fully aware that my numbers were nothing to be proud of, I had no choice but to report the facts, so I read out the figures for the month. As soon as I started speaking, Michael shouted, "Hey, I made you the manager, and this is what I get? Last month, I let it slide because you just took over. But this month's numbers are also down compared to last year. Do you know what happens if your performance is worse for 2 months in a row?" Everyone in the room went silent, barely daring to breathe. "I'm sorry. The new Castle Electronics store opened 2 months ago and it's closer to the station, so we've lost a lot of customers to them." When I explained this, Michael responded, "I know that. What's with the excuses? This is why incompetents are useless. The store James is managing is far from the station, which is a disadvantage. Our store is also smaller. And Castle Electronics has been advertising aggressively. Of course, we need to address this as a company. So putting all the responsibility on James is unfair." Daniel came to my aid. But Michael dismissed him. "Are you guys trying to pass off your responsibilities onto the company? What's the point of your title and salary? The store's poor performance is entirely the manager's responsibility. It means you're incompetent. I thought, if that's the case, then the overall poor performance of the division is the division head's responsibility, right? But I couldn't say that out loud. Also, our company's salary is quite low, and we have unpaid overtime. His arguments didn't make sense to me because being told to work hard for such low pay was not convincing. Would it be easier if I just accepted it and think to myself that I just need to work harder? Is it wrong for a salaried employee to question their boss? While I was mulling over these thoughts, I heard something shocking. "So, James, you don't need to come in tomorrow. You're fired." I couldn't believe my ears for a moment. I could feel the other store managers in the room freezing up as well. As Michael said this, Daniel tried to intervene again. "Come on, Michael, that's too much. James understands he needs to improve the numbers, so let's leave it at that." As he said, trying to defuse the situation, Michael replied, "What are you talking about? I never joke. James is fired as of today. The rest of you, if you don't want the same fate, you better raise your numbers." That's the end of the manager's meeting, and he left the room. Some people looked at me with pity, while others pretended not to notice, but the atmosphere was awful. "James, don't worry. I'll talk to Michael later. Everyone knows it's not your fault," Daniel said, patting me on the shoulder. I appreciated the encouragement, but I thought Michael might actually fire me, and there were limits to what Daniel could do. That day, I had to go back to my store and work, but it was hard to keep a positive attitude and smile while serving customers. The next day, it was my day off. The store is open year-round, so we work on a shift basis. On my days off, the assistant manager and other staff handle the store, but as the manager, I always have a mountain of tasks to do. So I often drop by the store even on my days off. However, after the emotional blow from the previous day's managers' meeting, I decided to take a proper break and relax at home. A notification sound from my phone indicated a new message. It was from John, the assistant manager. Checking the message, I saw this. "A new manager has arrived at the store today, but I wasn't informed beforehand, and I'm confused. I heard you've resigned, but is that true?" Lying down and looking at my phone, I was so shocked that I jumped up and shouted, "What, in my empty house?" I hurried to call John but then thought he might not be able to talk during work, so I replied via message. "I haven't heard anything about that. Can you call me after work?" I sent the message to John and immediately called the company. I didn't know who would answer, but it was likely to be Daniel or Michael. "Hello, TKD Electronics." Recognizing Michael's voice, I quickly spoke over him. "Michael, were you serious about what you said yesterday? That I'm fired?" He laughed. "Oh, it's you, James? Did you think I was joking? How naive. You really thought you could stay with those numbers? Someone as useless as you isn't employable anywhere. Go find another part-time job if you can. This can't be happening." I was at a loss. But refusing to be defeated, I quickly thought and said, "Michael, please give me another chance. I'll increase sales." "Another chance? How long do you need? Your chance is over. I was lenient your first month, wasn't I? But you blew it this month too. Goodbye. You need to sign your resignation papers by tomorrow. It's an order from the division head." He refused to listen and hung up. Realizing it was pointless to argue, I had no choice but to hang up. The next day, still unable to fully believe it, I went to the company. Michael indeed had the resignation papers ready, and I was made to sign them. Daniel, looking apologetic, said quietly, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, James. This is my failure too. It's not your fault, Daniel. I couldn't deliver either," I replied before packing up my desk and leaving the company. Outside, I looked up at the sky. I had worked so hard for 10 years, never expecting to leave so abruptly. I recalled the previous night. After the store closed at 9 p.m., John called me. "I'm sorry for calling late. We just finished closing the store," John said, out of breath. "Thanks for calling even though you're busy." When I thanked him, John began to explain just how tough the day had been. When I came in for my late shift, there was a stranger at the register. When I asked Emily who was on the early shift, she said he was the new manager. I was surprised, but I thought it was a sudden personnel change and you hadn't had time to inform me. Then Michael came and said, James has resigned, so follow the new manager's orders. John continued, clearly upset. Then the new manager started changing the store layout, making it difficult for customers and us to find products. After causing a mess, he told us to put everything back the way it was. Now we have to clean up on our own, and we don't know when we'll finish. I was shocked by John's account. That's unbelievable. He just left after making a mess? I asked. Yes, he left after causing chaos, John replied. Then he said we couldn't log overtime and should mark it as leaving on time. When I was stunned, he said, with such poor sales, we can't afford extra labor costs. You understand that as the assistant manager, right? I don't think I can work with this new manager. John lamented. I felt a sense of crisis, realizing things were really going wrong. However, having been fired, I felt helpless, unable to do anything about it. I told John that being fired at the manager's meeting was not my decision, and that he could always talk to me if he had any problems. Life is tough, I muttered to myself, looking up at the sky as an unemployed man. But I couldn't keep dwelling on it forever. I had worked hard for 10 years at TKD Electronics, but the world was bigger than this. With nothing left to lose, I decided it was time to start something new. I shifted my mindset and began thinking about what to do next. Returning home, I calmed down and realized I needed to find a job. I opened my computer and started looking at job sites. Though it had been a while since I last searched for a job, I found the variety of job types had changed a lot since my student days. And it was interesting. I reminisced about my student days when I was looking for jobs in system management and development. Never did I imagine I'd be working in retail for so long. Life is truly unpredictable. As I scrolled through the job listings on the job site, one ad caught my eye. Castle Electronics Corporation. It's TKD Electronics' rival and, arguably, the reason I got fired. If Castle Electronics hadn't opened near my store, our sales wouldn't have dropped so much, and I wouldn't have been scolded by the division head. How interesting fate is. Before I knew it, I found myself applying for a position at Castle Electronics. The next day, I received a call from Castle Electronics' HR department. They scheduled an interview, so at least I wasn't being outright rejected. On the day of the interview, I dressed in a suit, feeling somewhat indifferent, thinking I'd probably be rejected anyway. Sure, having experience in the same industry might help. But TKD Electronics was significantly smaller and less reputable compared to Castle Electronics. I figured the interviewers would probably just look down on me. Castle Electronics is a rapidly growing company, popular among the younger generation. Most of the interviewees were in their 20s. Having worked at TKD Electronics for 10 years, I found myself in my mid-30s, almost 40, facing this harsh reality. The fresh young faces looking to switch jobs after gaining 3 years of experience somewhere else were dazzling. So dazzling that I jokingly thought I should have brought sunglasses. I waited in the hallway for my turn. Next please, I heard, and entered the room. The interviewer was a woman. I introduced myself, bowed, and sat down when she said so. She asked the usual questions about my education, and I answered them. Next, she would undoubtedly ask about my work history and the reason for leaving my last job. I was nervous. Admitting I was fired for poor sales performance as a manager would be the worst possible explanation. Should I lie? No, I had to be honest. While I was contemplating this, the interviewer asked a surprising question. James, what do you value most in life? Caught off guard, I hesitated but replied. Well, I want to do what I'm good at, earn a living from it, and enjoy my life. I realized halfway through and was taken aback. Damn, that wasn't the right answer for an interview. I should have highlighted what I could bring to the company. For example, I could have said that while I didn't hit the sales numbers, I was a trusted team leader. No, that wouldn't have been much of an appeal either. Then the interviewer asked, "What are you good at, James?" This seemed more like a typical interview question. How should I answer? Given my extensive experience in customer service at TKD Electronics and considering this was an interview with Castle Electronics, I decided to highlight my skills in the electronics retail industry. I have achieved top individual sales in my area. I have extensive experience in customer service. Since it wasn't a lie, I answered honestly. The interviewer then asked, "What are you good at or passionate about? Outside of the skills you've developed at work?" After thinking for a while, I replied, "Well, I like programming. I went to a technical school to develop my skills. So I enjoy working on computers and I'm good at programming." She then said, "I see. Thank you for your time today," abruptly ending the interview. I said, "Thank you," and left the room, letting out a sigh. I was sure I had failed. I knew from the start that there was no way I would get the job. But I still went to the interview because I had a tiny bit of hope. I felt completely crushed. My interview felt shorter than the others, almost like I was being dismissed outright. Exhausted, I decided to start job hunting with renewed vigor the next day. I registered with a recruitment agency and set up a meeting. Failures make me stronger. To reflect on my failure at the Castle Electronics interview the previous day, I watched videos and read books about interview techniques. As night fell and I took a break, my phone rang. Seeing an unknown number, I cautiously answered, and a woman's voice said, "This is Jessica from Castle Electronics." I was so surprised that I jumped up from my chair. "Thank you for coming in for an interview yesterday. Regarding the result. So, this company even calls those who didn't make it. What a courteous and nice company. It's really too bad I won't get to work there." As I was lost in thought, the woman continued, "We would like to offer you the position. Can you come in tomorrow?" "Did you say I got the job?" When I instinctively asked for confirmation, the woman on the other end replied in a clear, cheerful voice, "Yes. Can you start working right away? Your annual salary will be $200,000. What? Life is interesting because you never know what will happen. And so, a year passed since that event. I was having dinner after work. I was dining with John, the previous assistant manager from TKD Electronics, and Daniel, who used to be a section chief. "It's been a long time. I'm glad to see you both doing well," John said after a long time apart. "John, you took over your family's farm, right? You look a bit tanned but healthy." Daniel, who had left the company before John, replied. Both of them had gotten fed up with TKD Electronics' ways and quit shortly after I did. Daniel now works for another major company. That company is none other than Castle Electronics Corporation, where I currently work. You guys are amazing, earning $100,000 a year. Meanwhile, I'm struggling with the hard work on the farm. Well, it's not physically hard since I have the stamina, but this summer's drought made it tough to grow crops. And then the hurricane damaged the vegetables that had grown. But all in all, things are going well. Most importantly, I enjoy the work." John shared his recent experiences. "John, when James invited you to Castle Electronics, you said, 'I'm done with corporate jobs.' That was a bold move. I, on the other hand, immediately said, 'I'm in.' By the way, James isn't just a $100,000 earner, he makes $200,000 a year." Daniel said with a laugh. "That's right. After getting hired at Castle Electronics, I headhunted John and Daniel, who had tough times at TKD Electronics. John declined, but Daniel now works with me as a colleague. I had that authority because Castle Electronics is a meritocracy that values ability over educational background or years of service." "James, you knew the competition was tough when you applied to Castle Electronics, right? What do you think led to your success?" John asked. "I haven't told you this story yet. During the interview, I was sure I'd failed. But then I got a call saying I was hired and started the next day. On my first day, I had time to talk with the president and the interviewer, and I learned an amazing fact. When I answered, John leaned forward and exclaimed, 'An amazing fact,' eager to hear more. It turns out that Jessica, the woman who interviewed me, was a year ahead of me at the IT technical school I attended. I didn't know her. But I was somewhat famous for my good grades, so she knew of me. Coincidentally, She had bought appliances from me at TKD Electronics and remembered my good customer service. John reacted with excitement. Wow, that's an incredible coincidence. So, Jessica had a very positive impression of you both in school and as a salesperson. That was essentially correct, but I felt awkward saying, "Yeah, isn't that impressive?" So I stayed silent. Daniel, who knew the full details, stepped in to help. Exactly. And even more surprising, Jessica is the daughter of Castle Electronics president. The president's daughter. So, James, you were highly regarded by her, and that's why the president immediately decided to hire you? When John summarized the situation, Daniel responded, "Exactly." Jessica knew James had high-level IT skills from school and saw how well he handled customers at TKD Electronics, drawing out their needs and explaining products clearly. She also noticed how respected he was as a manager. She thought highly of his professional and personal qualities. She also knew about TKD Electronics' reputation as a tough workplace. So she didn't need to ask why he left. She assumed that if he was let go, it was the company's fault. That's why she offered to consider other talented employees from TKD Electronics if James recommended them, which is how she reached out to us. Daniel explained to John. "Daniel, you've also been studying on your own and have high IT skills. But I didn't know Jessica thought so highly of me. When did you two discuss this?" Daniel smiled and replied, "Jessica likes you a lot, so she often asks me about your time at TKD Electronics. We talk about you a lot. Please don't tell her any weird stories, okay?" I said with an embarrassed smile. "Of course not. I only tell her good things. Besides, Jessica is so fond of you that if I said anything bad, she'd be mad at me," Daniel said. John chimed in with a grin. "So, does that mean the daughter of the president likes you, James?" Embarrassed, I stood up and exclaimed, "No way. Someone like me, an introverted nobody, being liked by a beautiful and capable woman like Jessica? That's impossible." Daniel laughed and said, "James, I didn't know you back in your student days. And maybe you were just a self-proclaimed introvert staring at a computer, but that's not who you are now. You're definitely a capable guy with high customer service and IT skills, and you're a thoughtful person. If I were a woman, I'd be head over heels for you. Even as a man, I admire you a lot as a colleague and friend." I was stunned, having never been spoken to like this, and had no words to respond. John added, "I agree. I think you're a very capable guy, James, and I really admire you. When I was the assistant manager, you supported me a lot. Even after you were suddenly fired, you kept in touch and supported me, listening to my complaints about the new manager. Without your support, I might have been crushed under the new manager. I can't thank you enough." Feeling flustered, I said, "Please stop, trying to hide my embarrassment." But deep down, I felt a warm sense of appreciation. And as an adult, I was almost moved to tears. John, it became clear how competent James was right after he left TKD Electronics. The new manager was overbearing, arrogant, and clueless, causing sales to plummet. This manager was headhunted by Michael to turn things around, so when it failed, Williams, the president of TKD Electronics, blamed Michael, and eventually, Michael was fired. The company's debt ballooned. And with competent employees leaving, bankruptcy seems inevitable. John said this. "Yeah, we were lucky to get out before being caught in the fire, right, John?" Daniel replied, and John nodded, saying, "And now, both of you are utilizing your customer service and store management skills from TKD Electronics, along with your high IT skills, to handle both internal systems and store operations at Castle Electronics. You've become key players in a major company, earning high salaries. And Castle Electronics' performance is soaring. I'm proud of my former senior's success." "You're flattering us too much, John. Are you trying to butter us up so we'll treat you to dinner?" Daniel joked. "Oops, you caught me." John playfully replied, but we had planned to treat him to dinner from the start. Jokes aside, it was clear John genuinely admired and respected us. I have always prided myself on working diligently on whatever task was in front of me. Sometimes, it's unclear if that hard work will pay off, but moments like this show that it can. Relationships built purely on self-interest are fragile and can quickly fall apart. However, trust that has been built over time is much more resilient. Reconnecting with these valued friends is a treasure to me. I looked at the two people in front of me and thought of Jessica. These precious connections. Thank you, I murmured. At a lively reunion with 100 attendees, I was enjoying chatting with my old classmates. Then, Michael, who claims to be an elite manager, showed up. He looked at me and snorted. I'm a manager at a top-ranking company. You're nothing compared to me. In front of everyone, he looked down on me. Michael has always seemed to think he's better than me. Thanks to him, the fun reunion was ruined. But right after that, Michael faced a rude awakening. My name is Kevin, and I'm 30 years old. I currently work at a top company in the sales department, and I'm busy every day. People who knew me in the past might be surprised to see how much I've changed. That's because I used to be timid and quiet, and was unable to stand up to anyone. There was a reason for that. Before I was old enough to remember, my mother passed away. So, my father raised me by himself. However, since he was busy with work, my grandmother mostly took care of me. She did her best to look after me and showered me with love. Thanks to her, I never felt the loneliness of not having a mother. One day, there was a parents' day at elementary school. Naturally, my grandmother came to see me. When she saw me in the classroom, she waved with a big smile. A few classmates saw this and laughed out loud. Your mom's not here, huh? Poor kid. Other classmates looked at me with pity. It was the first time I'd been called poor, and I couldn't hide my shock. They also made fun of my clothes, saying, "You're wearing those because you don't have a mom, huh? You're so lame." I couldn't express the feeling in words. From then on, I gradually became quiet and more withdrawn. Some classmates continued to make fun of me. I couldn't understand why I had to go through this just because my mother wasn't around. But most of my classmates stood up for me, so I was able to enjoy elementary school. After graduating elementary school and moving on to junior high and high school, I started to feel the need to change my personality. I didn't want to be teased for the rest of my life. I absolutely didn't want to live that kind of life. So, I began to actively join groups of friends and socialize. I also worked hard at my studies, which I wasn't good at. Gradually, I became more outgoing. After that, no one teased me anymore. After graduating from high school, I got a job at my current company. I considered going to college, but with my father's salary, it was difficult, so I gave up. Job hunting with just a high school diploma was tough, and I was rejected by many companies at the application stage. But I didn't give up and eventually got an offer from my current company. I worked with the intention of dedicating my life to the company that hired me. Fortunately, neither my colleagues nor my superiors looked down on me for only having a high school diploma, so I was able to focus on my work. I was grateful for that environment every day. 2 years after starting my job, I attended my coming-of-age ceremony. My grandmother bought me a fine suit for the occasion. "Kevin, you look great. I can't believe my little, weak grandson has grown up so much. I'm so happy." She said so with tears of joy. I was deeply moved as well. I vowed to become the kind of person who could repay my grandmother for all she had done for me. Entering the large venue for the coming-of-age ceremony, I saw it was filled with new working adults in formal attire. I scanned the area for any familiar faces and soon a few classmates approached me. They were my classmates from elementary school. My heart raced with excitement at seeing them after such a long time. But then, I saw the person I least wanted to encounter. That person was walking straight towards me. I instinctively looked down. "Kevin. Long time no see." It was Michael, my classmate from elementary school. He placed his hand on my shoulder as he spoke. I flinched by reflex. Seeing my reaction, Michael started laughing. "You're still as timid and weak as ever. So, which college are you attending? Whose fault do you think it is that I'm like this?" I felt a bit of anger but answered honestly. "I'm not in college. I'm working now." When I said that, Michael laughed even harder. "Not in college? I knew you were useless. Who doesn't go to college these days? Hearing Michael's words, the other classmates fell silent, treating a classmate he hadn't seen in years as worthless. Michael's character was still rotten. But I was used to this from Michael. He had teased me relentlessly in elementary school. Yes, the one who led the teasing back then was Michael. Michael would constantly target me, making degrading comments about my poverty. His family was wealthy, and he couldn't believe that I was being raised by my grandmother. At first, I ignored him, but then an incident happened that made it impossible to ignore him. It was during a recess at elementary school. Suddenly, Michael started shouting that his wallet was missing. Bringing wallets to school was against the rules. So none of us, including me, even knew he had brought one. But Michael claimed someone had stolen it. The thief is someone in this classroom. Then, unbelievably, he accused a classmate of being the thief. The classroom fell silent. And from that moment, my nightmare began. Suddenly, Michael grabbed my backpack and turned it upside down. I was stunned by his action. "Michael! What are you doing? Stop it!" Despite my protests, Michael didn't stop. He emptied my backpack and started going through my desk. "The only one poor enough to steal my wallet is you. Give it back." I hadn't taken Michael's wallet. I couldn't understand why I was being accused and felt utterly confused. Hearing the commotion, the teachers came into the classroom. After we explained the situation, they urged Michael to look elsewhere. But Michael insisted, "Kevin stole my wallet. He hates that I'm rich." What a thing to say. I had never envied Michael. Who would want to be like someone so rotten? I remember feeling my body heat up with anger. But in the next moment, Michael found his wallet inside his own desk. Everyone around widened their eyes with surprise. Despite having accused me of stealing, Michael laughed as if nothing had happened. "There it is. Thank goodness. I almost got in trouble with my mom for losing my wallet. What was there to be thankful for? I had almost been falsely accused of theft. But Michael didn't care about my feelings and didn't even apologize." Seeing this, the teacher asked him to apologize to me, but Michael uttered something shocking. "Kevin is poor, that's why he was suspected. It's not my fault. It's Kevin's fault for being poor and motherless." I couldn't believe my ears. Why did I have to hear such things from Michael? I decided to avoid him as much as possible from then on. At that moment, I made a vow to myself. However, since we were in the same class, Michael continued to bother me. Each time, it was a miserable experience. After graduating from elementary school, I thought I was finally free from Michael. But running into him again at the coming-of-age ceremony was really unfortunate. As I remained silent, my classmates tried to help me out. Working instead of going to college is impressive. Hearing this, Michael snorted. "What's so impressive about that? He probably just didn't want to study. Unlike you, I'm studying business at a top university. Shows how much smarter I am than you." I wanted to get away from Michael as quickly as possible, so I decided to just listen to him without reacting. A top university? That's impressive, Michael. But deep down, I didn't mean it at all. My classmates seemed to understand my true feelings and started to ignore Michael's boasting as well. Michael, satisfied with his bragging, finally walked away. I thought I would never see him again. I felt relieved from the bottom of my heart. But fate was cruel. 10 years later, I turned 30. To celebrate my grandmother's 80th birthday, I took her to a high-end seafood restaurant. The restaurant was a hidden gem in an alleyway, known only to a few. Knowing my grandmother loved seafood, I was sure she would enjoy it. With excitement, I walked in with my grandmother. The restaurant was cozy with only counter seating, run by a single owner chef. My grandmother was impressed by the place. "Is it okay to dine at such an expensive place?" my grandmother asked me worriedly. The owner chef smiled at my grandmother's words. "Today's your special day, madam. Don't worry and enjoy anything you like." My grandmother happily started ordering. Every dish the chef prepared was delicious, and our conversation flourished. Seeing her so happy, I thought about bringing her here again. As I was thinking this, the restaurant door suddenly swung open. A loud voice came from behind me. "Fancy meeting you here." It must be fate, huh? I turned around, recognizing the unpleasant voice, to see Michael grinning with a woman by his side. My heart sank. Running into him again, especially during this celebration, was truly unfortunate. I decided to leave before my mood was completely ruined. Just as I was helping my grandmother up from her seat after finishing our meal, it happened. Michael started talking about himself again. This is my fiancée. We're getting married soon. You might recognize her. He introduced the woman standing next to him. She looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't place her. Then Michael continued, proudly. It's Alyssa, the cutest girl in our elementary school class. Don't you remember? Maybe you didn't care because you were such a gloomy guy. Alyssa. Oh, that's right, I vaguely remember her. But it didn't matter to me at all. Congratulations, I said, trying to leave the restaurant. But Michael wouldn't stop talking. If you want, I can introduce you to someone good too. Though, they'd probably hate a dull guy like you. I couldn't believe he was belittling me in front of my grandmother. I was shocked that Michael's character hadn't changed at all in 10 years. My grandmother's face turned worried in an instant. I could see the owner chef watching us anxiously from behind the counter. I started shaking with anger and, without responding, hurried out of the restaurant with my grandmother. I didn't need Michael to introduce me to any women. I was seething with rage. Once outside, my grandmother looked at me with concern. Did something happen between you two? He was being very rude. To ease her worries, I lightly explained that Michael had teased me in elementary school. He's always been like that. He's not worth worrying about. I'm better than him now. Hearing this, my grandmother looked relieved and began to smile. Kevin, you've become so strong. You used to come crying to me over the smallest things. You've really grown up. Come on, Grandma, I'm 30 now. I replied, laughing with her. Despite Michael's unwelcome appearance, the birthday celebration turned out to be very enjoyable. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Why did I keep running into Michael, someone I didn't want to see? Was this some kind of fate? I hoped I wouldn't see him again. Seeing him always brought me down. But fate was not so kind. A few days later, I was at work as usual. It was a day for outside sales. As I walked with my colleague Mark, I saw Michael ahead of us. I was speechless at my bad luck. Again. I thought, trying to walk past him without being noticed. But Michael spotted me. He immediately approached and started talking. Your company is around here? I can't believe a high school graduate like you found a job. Must be a third-rate company, no need to ask. Michael sneered at me. Mark, who was with me, was shocked at Michael's words. Yeah, my company is just over there. It might be a third-rate company. I responded, trying to end the conversation. Michael laughed again. That poor company, stuck with a useless, dull guy like you. No wonder their performance is poor. I should lend you some of my brains. Here we go again. Michael just couldn't resist looking down on me. I was too exasperated to even respond. Mark, standing beside me, looked irritated and said, Kevin, we need to get going, it's a waste of time dealing with someone like him. Michael's face turned red with anger. But I followed Mark's advice and said, I'm heading out for sales calls now. I'm busy, so see you around, and started walking away. Michael, still fuming, shouted after us. I'm sacrificing my valuable time to talk to you useless people. You should be grateful. Both Mark and I were speechless. Michael was unbelievably foolish. Then Mark, as if remembering something, shared a shocking fact with me. I was stunned when I heard it. A while later, I received a letter at my house. Opening it, I found it was an invitation to an elementary school reunion. An elementary school reunion. Michael would probably attend. If he did, he'd definitely look down on me again, so despite wanting to go, I thought it would be best to skip it. Just then, a classmate called to confirm my attendance. When I said I wanted to decline, the classmate asked, is it because Michael will be there? They must have remembered how Michael used to tease me in elementary school. I explained honestly that even after high school graduation, I had run into Michael a few times and endured his insults, so I didn't want to attend. The classmate then gave me some happy news. Don't worry. Michael isn't coming, he has other plans. So feel free to join us. Huh? Really? If Michael wasn't coming to the reunion, I had no reason not to go, so I decided to attend. Without Michael, it seemed like it would be a fun event, and I felt excited. On the day of the reunion, I dressed in the outfit I had prepared for the occasion and headed confidently to the venue. The reunion was held in a large restaurant in town, a grand event. It had been 18 years since elementary school graduation, but this was the first reunion. I was excited to see what everyone was up to and catch up with them. Entering the venue, I saw my classmates already gathered, enjoying conversations with wine glasses in hand. I quickly grabbed a drink and joined the group, enjoying the lively chats. Some classmates were married with children, sharing photos and stories. Then, a commotion arose near the entrance. I felt a sense of foreboding. My classmates and I turned our attention to the entrance. And I was frozen with fear. There stood Michael, with Alyssa by his side. Wasn't he supposed to be absent? I stood in shock, unable to move. A classmate hurried over to me. This morning, Michael called to say he was coming after all. I'm sorry for the late notice. The classmate looked apologetic. But since I was already there, I decided to stay unnoticed and quietly leave the venue. Unfortunately, Michael spotted me. As soon as he saw me, he walked over with a smug grin. Leaving already? I'm here too, let's chat more. Other classmates were watching me. Although I wanted to leave immediately, I didn't want to ruin the atmosphere. Reluctantly, I decided to stay a bit longer. One of the classmates spoke to Michael in surprise. I'm shocked. I never expected you to be dating Alyssa. Michael wore a smug expression. Back in those days, I didn't pay much attention to girls, but apparently, Alyssa was famous among the boys for being cute. Alyssa blushed. We met through a mutual friend. I heard there was someone who graduated from a prestigious university and worked at a top company. And it turned out to be Michael. We started dating and quickly decided to get married. Even I'm surprised at how fast it all happened. Everyone looked at Michael with envy. Michael, basking in their admiration, proudly said, "We're getting married soon. I'd love it if you all could come to the wedding." Some people applauded and congratulated him. I envy that you are in the happiest time of your life. Graduating from a prestigious university really makes a difference. One classmate said, and Michael beamed. Well, I'm nothing like Kevin over there. If you end up like him, your life is over. I couldn't believe he would say something like that at a reunion. I was too shocked to speak. While I was struggling to contain my anger, Michael dropped a bombshell. I'm a manager at a top company. Unlike you, who will be stuck working at a third-rate company for the rest of your life. In front of 100 classmates, Michael looked down on me. I had reached my limit. Then, a classmate exclaimed in amazement. Aren't you working at that top company, Oakwood Corporation? Being a manager there is impressive. I was stunned. That couldn't be true. What was he talking about? I calmly asked Michael. Which department at Oakwood Corporation are you a manager of? Everyone turned their attention to Michael. He started to panic. What does it matter to you? Why should I tell you? A classmate nudged Michael, laughing. Come on, don't be shy. It's not like it costs you anything to tell us. A classmate said jokingly, making Michael even more flustered. Encouraged by the classmates, Michael reluctantly muttered in a small voice, the sales department. Cheers erupted from the classmates. A sales manager at Oakwood Corporation? That's incredible. The sales department there is known for being highly competitive. Way to go, Michael. Michael looked proud again. But everything he said was a lie. I couldn't let him continue to deceive everyone. It was time to reveal the truth about Michael. Oh, really? Who approved the new manager? Huh? Michael looked confused. Everyone turned to me, puzzled. Michael, when did you become the sales manager at Oakwood Corporation? Michael blared at me. About 6 months ago. Why do you care? Even if you're jealous, you'll never work at Oakwood Corporation. Our classmates were holding their breath, watching the exchange. I couldn't help but laugh. What's so funny? Because, Michael, you becoming the sales manager at Oakwood Corporation is impossible. And you saying I could never work there is quite ironic. What? The room fell silent. Then, I revealed the truth. I'm the sales manager at Oakwood Corporation. My classmates stared at me with wide eyes, clearly in disbelief. No one seemed to believe what they were hearing. Michael seemed too shocked to speak. There's no way. You're just a high school graduate. High school grads can't work at Oakwood Corporation. You must be at some third-rate company. I showed Michael my business card, which I happened to have with me. It clearly stated that I was the sales manager at Oakwood Corporation. The classmates began passing my card around, and the room buzzed with excitement. Michael's face turned pale and he started to tremble. Kevin, a sales manager at Oakwood Corporation. Michael was completely bewildered. Indeed, Oakwood Corporation doesn't hire high school graduates now, but they did when I joined. I started in the sales department right out of high school. Michael looked even more shaken, almost collapsing. Yes, I actually work at Oakwood Corporation. Currently, I serve as the sales manager. The path to becoming a manager wasn't easy. Being a high school graduate meant I had to work harder than my college-educated colleagues. I spent countless hours working, sometimes even sleeping at the office. Through perseverance, I achieved top sales results in the department. This made me well known within the sales team. And this spring, my efforts were recognized, and I became the youngest manager in the company's history. I could hardly believe it myself when I got the promotion. It felt like a dream. Now, as a manager, I strive to make the sales department even better every day. That's why I knew it was impossible for Michael to be the sales manager at Oakwood Corporation. Moreover, Michael wasn't an employee of my company. Michael, what's going on? Alyssa, who had been quietly listening, raised her voice in shock. Other classmates were also puzzled. Does this mean Michael has been lying to us? The room erupted in murmurs. Michael stayed silent, not knowing what to say. Since he wouldn't admit it, I decided to reveal the truth. Why lie, Michael? You work in the sales department at Johnson Industries, a subsidiary of Oakwood Corporation, don't you? Michael looked at me in disbelief. Alyssa was stunned. How do you know that? Michael stammered, trembling. A loud voice emerged from the crowd. I told him. Do you remember me? Mark, with a sharp gaze, stared at Michael. Michael seemed to recognize him instantly and was taken aback. You're Mark from university. We were also in elementary school together, right? And you were with Kevin earlier. Are you also an employee at Oakwood Corporation? Yes, I am. You teased me endlessly back in elementary school, remember? When I found out we were going to the same university, I was really upset. But you seem to have forgotten all about me. Now, I'm working in the sales department at Oakwood Corporation. The classmates were in an uproar. Mark was actually my colleague. After graduating from F University, he joined Oakwood Corporation. And he became my subordinate. Mark also grew up in a household without a mother, just like me. Because of this, Michael had bullied Mark in the same way he bullied me. Mark hated Michael and had tried to avoid any interaction with him from that point on. Unfortunately, he ended up at the same university as Michael but was in a different department, so he managed to graduate without being bullied. However, while we were out on a sales call, we ran into Michael. At that moment, Mark revealed that he had gone to the same university as Michael and told me about his job. Wait a minute, Mark graduated from F University, right? So Michael also went to F University? But didn't Michael say he graduated from T University? Michael started to get flustered again. Alyssa looked like she was about to cry, tears welling up in her eyes. Michael had lied to us about graduating from a prestigious university, and also about working at a top company. How much did he need to boost his ego? Unbelievable. Where I graduated from and where I work is none of your business. Stop meddling. Michael finally snapped and started yelling. The classmates around us were stunned into silence. Don't boast about lies. Think about how Alyssa feels. Mark blared at Michael. But Michael didn't back down. Alyssa loves me. It doesn't matter whether I went to school or where I work. We're connected by true love. He said this with such a confidence. How could he say that after boasting with such false credentials? Alyssa stood there in shock and began to cry. You lied to my parents too. We've even had a formal engagement. How are you going to take responsibility? I hate liars. I can't marry you. Our classmates surrounded Alyssa, looking at her with pity. Michael was stunned by her words, his previous bravado gone. He started pleading to Alyssa. Alyssa, you said you loved me no matter what. I admit I lied about my background, but please don't say that. But Alyssa refused to even look at him. Of course. I wouldn't want to be involved with a liar even if I were in her position. Consider the engagement off. I can't do this anymore. Alyssa said and left the reunion hall. Michael desperately ran after her, leaving the venue as well. The hall fell into a stunned silence. I can't believe Michael was lying about all of this. At least the truth came out now. Alyssa would have been miserable otherwise. With Michael and Alyssa gone, we were free to reminisce and enjoy the rest of the reunion. A few days later, I arrived at the office as usual. There, I saw Mr. Johnson, the president of Johnson Industries, and Michael. I figured it was about the recent event. With that in mind, I approached the two of them. As soon as Mr. Johnson saw me, he began to apologize. I am deeply sorry for the trouble Michael has caused. We had no idea he was using your name to boast about a false position at Oakwood Corporation. Mr. Johnson looked sincerely apologetic. We truly had no idea he was lying about being the sales manager. Michael, apologize properly. Mr. Johnson urged Michael to apologize. But Michael, sulking, didn't move. Yes, Michael had been boasting in various places that he was the sales manager at Oakwood Corporation. Mark had discovered this and reported it to Johnson Industries. I was just joking around. Kevin and I are friends, so it's no big deal. Michael showed no sign of remorse. I had reached my limit. Michael and I are not friends. Since he shows no remorse, I expect appropriate action to be taken. When I said this, Michael turned pale. Mr. Johnson began to panic. Of course. We will consider Michael's position when we return to the company. Come on, Michael. Let's go. Michael suddenly stood up and clung to me. Kevin. I apologize for everything. Please, I'm begging you. I ignored Michael and walked away. It's too late for him to apologize now. He needs to deal with the consequences of his actions. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Michael and Alyssa's wedding was called off. Additionally, Mr. Johnson fired Michael from the company. Michael is now desperately hunting for a job, but in this small town, his reputation has quickly spread, and no company is willing to hire him. It seems it will be very difficult for Michael to find a new job anytime soon. But this is the natural consequence of involving so many people in his lies. Whatever happens to Michael from now on is none of my concern. I will continue to live my life with my head held high. No way. How can someone as incompetent as you be here? Boarding on the same plane means your incompetence might rub off on me. Sophie shouted loudly on the plane. How rude, but I didn't want to cause a scene on the plane. Oh, what a coincidence. I replied calmly, but in my mind, I was furious at Sophie's words. My trip is completely ruined because I ran into you, Michelle said as she sat down on her seat. As usual, Sophie and Michelle's words were really harsh. However, this was the last time they would say such rude things to me. My name is Alex, and I'm 30 years old. I was always a frail kid from the time I was little and was often hospitalized. I was also a very shy and quiet kid. My parents took good care of me without a single look of disgust. Whenever I got a fever, no matter how late it was, they would take me to the hospital, and they always stayed with me when I was admitted. I loved my parents dearly. I always wanted to take care of them in the future with much gratitude. That's why I decided to pursue a stable career in healthcare. I studied hard and got into a nursing program at a prestigious medical school. My parents cried tears of joy when I was accepted. I was so happy to see them so proud. Thus began my college life at the medical school. I found nursing studies fascinating and threw myself into my studies. Although my studies were very demanding, my parents supported me wholeheartedly. Thanks to their support, I was able to focus on my studies in college. I can't thank them enough. I thought those days would last forever. But reality was not that easy. It happened so suddenly. In my third year of the medical school, my parents died in an accident. It was hopeless. With my parents gone, I wondered what I was going to do with my life. I questioned myself every day. They left me enough inheritance to graduate from the medical school. However, I was in no mental state to continue my nursing studies. So, I decided to drop out of the school. When I told my classmates, they looked at me with disdain. What? Dropping out of college is unthinkable, Sophie said coldly to me. Everyone else agreed with her. But only my classmate and best friend Jake was kind to me. Losing both parents at once is tough. I'm here for you, Alex. I was saved by Jake's words. 9 years have passed since then. Now, I have a job and live a busy yet fulfilling life. One day, I received a call from Jake. Jake and I kept in touch regularly even after I dropped out of the college. We occasionally went out for drinks and even traveled together. But we hadn't contacted each other lately due to our busy schedules. I was excited to hear from Jake after a long time. Hey, there's a reunion for our medical school classmates to celebrate that we are turning 30. Do you want to come, Alex? I was surprised by Jake's words. I didn't graduate from the school, so I don't have the right to go. When I said this skeptically, Jake laughed. No worries. Some classmates want to see you, so you should come too. There's no way any of my classmates want to see me. They all looked at me with disdain when I announced I was dropping out. I wasn't keen on attending the reunion. But since Jake was enthusiastic, I reluctantly agreed to go. Alright, I'll join. After hanging up, I sighed. On the day of the reunion, I arranged to meet Jake at a nearby cafe so we could go together. When I arrived at the cafe, Jake was already sitting inside. Hey! Long time no see. Jake looked as energetic as ever. Yeah, it's been about a year, right? Yeah. Got a girlfriend yet? You should find a good wife soon. Jake got married 2 years ago and is now a father of one. His occasional messages were mostly about his wife and child. I still didn't have a girlfriend, let alone a wife. It's not that I don't want one, but I'm so focused on work that I haven't had the chance to meet anyone. But someday, I hope to have a family of my own to care for. How's your work? We're swamped over here because we're short-staffed. Jake sighed as he spoke. Jake worked as a nurse at a university hospital. He said nurses were in short supply. Work is going all right. Why don't you come work at our hospital, Alex? Jake joked, laughing. I laughed off his suggestion. It's about time. Shall we go? At Jake's signal, we stood up and headed to the venue. My steps felt heavy. The reunion was held at a fancy restaurant in a hotel. On that day, they were going to rent out a restaurant and have a party to celebrate our entering 30s. A sparkling chandelier hung in the restaurant, adding to its luxurious atmosphere. The tables were lined with delicious-looking dishes. The restaurant was already bustling with many of our classmates. Jake and I entered the restaurant. As soon as the classmates saw Jake, they approached us. Jake. Long time no see. Yeah, it's been a while. They didn't even glance at me. Maybe I didn't belong here. I was about to leave. But then, the classmates talking to Jake noticed me and looked surprised. Alex. Is that you, Alex? They cheerfully called out to me. Then, with serious expressions, they said, we wanted to apologize. When you told us you were dropping out, we treated you badly. We're sorry, they said, apologize deeply. It's okay. I knew I'd be looked down on for dropping out while everyone else was working hard. Will you forgive us? Thank you. Let's drink tonight. My classmates had actually cared about me. I felt truly glad to have come here. Jake saw my relieved smile and grinned. However, this feeling didn't last long. A familiar voice came from behind. Why are you apologizing to someone like this guy? There's no need to apologize to an incompetent person. It was Sophie, the last person I wanted to see. Sophie looked down on me, calling me incompetent. This was way too much. I wanted to talk back, but I didn't want to engage with Sophie. Hey! Calling someone incompetent is rude. Jake spoke up for me, angrily confronting Sophie. But Sophie just laughed mockingly. Oh, I'm just telling the truth, right? He dropped out of the college, so he's useless, she said, glaring at me. Michelle, agreeing with Sophie, added. Sophie's right. And why is someone who didn't graduate here? Just leave. She raised her voice. All eyes in the restaurant turned toward us. Come on, let's keep it civil. We're here to have a good time. One of our classmates tried to defuse the situation, and Sophie and Michelle glared at me before moving away. Don't let what those two said bother you. They're just frustrated because their personal lives aren't going well. But their words were too harsh anyway. Jake and my classmates tried to comfort me. According to them, Sophie and Michelle were both single, participating in dating events but currently without boyfriends. They were also busy with work, unable to take breaks, which added to their frustration. Still, taking their frustrations out on me was unreasonable. I couldn't shake my discomfort. Feeling hungry, I decided to grab some food from the buffet. As I was transferring food to my plate, a woman bumped into me. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay? She looked at me with concern. No problem, just a light bump, I'm fine. When I said this, she stared intently at my face. Oh. Alex. Her voice suddenly became excited. Yes? As I said so, she smiled. I looked at the woman's face, wondering. Then I remembered. It's Emma. I was the clumsy one in college who always needed your help, remember? That's right, it was Emma. Back in college, Emma was always tripping over nothing or dropping things. I was so worried about Emma that I often helped her when I saw her. Now, she seemed like a very composed woman. It's great to see you again. I was really sad when you left college. Emma looked nostalgic and a bit sad. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye properly when I left. I said, and Emma smiled and replied. It's been tough for you. Thank you for all your help during college, Emma said. Then, I heard those annoying voices behind me again. Oh my, what a cute couple we have here. Seriously. Emma looked down. I was fed up with Sophie and Michelle's condescending attitudes. Before I knew it, I had grabbed Emma's arm and led her out of the venue. I sat Emma down on a bench outside the restaurant. Then, she spoke up. I dropped out in my 4th year of college. I wondered why she would do that after working so hard. Seeing my parents take care of my grandmother, I wanted to be able to help people in need of care too. So I enrolled in a vocational school for caregiving and now work as a caregiver. Wow, that's incredible. You as a caregiver? That's so cool. Emma, pursuing her own path, looked radiant to me. Sophie and Michelle call me useless too. But I don't regret becoming a caregiver. So Sophie and Michelle looked down on not just me, but Emma as well. I was filled with disbelief. Don't worry about what others say. Have confidence in yourself. You're amazing, Emma. I tried to comfort her. Emma nodded yes while tears welling up. Emma and I then moved to a nearby bar and talked about what we were doing after dropping out of college. The time flew by, and I could forget about the harsh words from Sophie and Michelle. Before parting ways, Emma and I exchanged contact information. I felt a warm light in my heart. Since then, a few months passed. Emma and I kept in touch and met frequently. Eventually, we started dating. From the moment I met Emma again at the party, I was in love with her. I admired how she followed her own path, and I wanted to be with her always. When I confessed my feelings, Emma said she felt the same. When I told Jake, he was surprised but genuinely happy for me. I felt truly blessed to have such a good friend. Though we were in a long-distance relationship, Emma and I communicated every night. And we decided to take a week off work starting today to go on a vacation overseas. It was the first time we'd spend such a long time together. I had been looking forward to this day. Alex, it's like a dream come true to be traveling with you, Emma said, smiling. I'm so happy to be traveling with you, too, I replied. I was excited about our first trip alone together. When it was time to board, Emma and I went into the plane. However, there we ended up meeting the last people we wanted to see. Our seats were in business class. I had splurged for our first overseas trip together. We settled into our seats. Then, we heard voices from the front. No way. Why are you here? Boarding on the same plane means your incompetence might rub off on me. I can't believe it. I couldn't believe my ears. It was Sophie and Michelle. A chance encounter with them on such a special trip. I cursed my bad luck. Sophie and Michelle were as rude as ever. I was extremely annoyed, but I didn't want to cause a scene on the plane. So I simply replied calmly, "Oh, what a coincidence." Michelle glared at me and said loudly, "My trip is completely ruined because I ran into you." I thought the same about them but ignored her. Emma looked at me with concern. Spending 7 hours on this flight near these two felt like a nightmare. As I was filled with despair, Emma whispered in my ear, "Let's just ignore them." Emma held my hand as she said that. Her touch helped ease my anger towards the two of them. Then the plane took off. Emma watched the receding land with excitement. 30 minutes after takeoff, the seatbelt sign turned off and drinks were served. Emma and I toasted with wine. Meanwhile, Sophie and Michelle were drinking more and more. Despite being on a plane, they were still making a bang. What a nuisance. I couldn't believe it. Michelle, wobbling from too much alcohol, got up to go to the bathroom. A few minutes later, she returned to her seat, looking very unwell. Just as she was about to sit down, she collapsed in front of her seat. I watched from my seat, thinking it was just from drinking too much. But then Sophie screamed, "No! Michelle, come on! Stay with me!" A flight attendant, hearing the scream, hurried over to Sophie. Then, the flight attendant panicked but said in a loud voice, "Is there any doctor on board?" The plane was in turmoil. And there seemed to be no doctor on board. Emma signaled to me with her eyes. I raised my hand and said, "I'm coming," and went to Michelle. Sophie looked shocked when she saw me. "What? You're not a doctor. Get out of the way and go back to your seat." I sighed and replied, "I am a doctor." "What?" But Sophie didn't seem to believe me. I didn't have time to deal with her. I needed to save Michelle immediately. I checked Michelle's condition. She wasn't breathing. Loosen her clothes quickly. Why should I follow your lead? Despite Michelle's condition, Sophie did nothing. I had the flight attendant help loosen Michelle's clothes. Then I began CPR. This looks like a heart attack. We need to land at the nearest airport immediately. Time is critical. I instructed the flight attendant. The flight attendant hurriedly contacted to the cockpit. 5 minutes after starting CPR, Michelle's pulse faintly returned. Sophie, who had been watching, asked me the same question again. "Are you really a doctor?" I was exasperated by her question at such a time. So I answered loudly and clearly. "Yes, I am. I'm a heart surgeon." Seeing me act decisively, Sophie started to believe I was a doctor. "Yes, I am currently a heart surgeon in another country. Even before my parents passed away, I had wanted to become a heart surgeon. However, the nursing program at the medical school I attended didn't offer the specialized training I needed. I talked to my parents about it. Follow the path you want. They encouraged me. So I decided to leave the medical school. Just then, the accident happened to my parents. They had left me a significant inheritance to ensure I could live freely. I believed that even in heaven, my parents would want me to pursue what I loved. So I decided to study cardiology abroad. I graduated from the medical school in another country and became a heart surgeon. So my living base at that time was not in the US. Every day was busy but fulfilling as a doctor. My parents, watching over me from heaven, would surely be proud of me now. However, I had only told a few people, like Jake and some relatives, about my career. This was because some people judge others by their occupation. People often said it was impressive to be a heart surgeon, but I didn't want to be valued just for my profession. I wanted people to see me for who I was on the inside. That was why I kept it to myself. But I was honest with Emma. I wanted her to know everything about me. Even after learning that I was a heart surgeon, Emma treated me no differently. I was glad I had told her the truth. The plane landed at the nearest airport. Fortunately, the airport was nearby, and we could land quickly. It was a silver lining. Michelle was immediately taken off the plane and transported by the waiting ambulance. For now, Michelle would be okay. I felt a deep sense of relief. Then Emma, standing next to me, began to cry. I'm so glad Michelle is safe. Even after being treated so poorly, Emma felt genuinely happy for Michelle. She really was a kind woman. I found myself even more drawn to her. Then Sophie approached to us. I was exhausted and didn't want to hear any more of Sophie's snide remarks. So I tried to pull Emma away from the scene. But Sophie kept following us. What on earth did she want? I stopped and turned to face Sophie. Sophie raised her voice to us. Thank you for saving Michelle today. I'm sorry for all the nasty things I said to you, Alex. Sophie apologized deeply. Emma approached Sophie and looked into her face. I'm really glad Michelle is okay. Everyone makes mistakes, and you can always start over, she said. Sophie began to cry, and Emma hugged her. I've always dreamed of becoming a nurse since I was little. So I worked hard in my nursing studies. But the job was much harsher than I expected. And it wasn't what I had imagined. Sophie confessed. Both Emma and I listened quietly to Sophie's story. Maybe I was jealous of you too for pursuing the paths you love. I'm truly sorry. I was so foolish, Sophie admitted. Seeing Sophie's honesty, my irritation faded away. I'm not one to dwell on the past. Let's forget about it. What matters is from now on, I said. Sophie's face brightened up. Thank you so much. Emma watched our conversation with a happy smile. A few hours later, Emma and I boarded an alternate flight for our vacation trip. We both felt incredibly cheerful. About an hour into the flight, I sat in my seat, feeling nervous. Just then, an announcement from the pilot echoed through the cabin. We have a special announcement. There's a man here who wants to propose to his beloved one. The passengers buzzed with excitement. How romantic. That's wonderful, Emma said, looking at me excitedly. I held Emma's hand. In fact, I had planned this proposal even before our trip. I knew Emma was a romantic. That's why I wanted to propose in a romantic way. So, though it took a lot of courage, I decided to propose on the plane. I had coordinated with the airline in advance to make the arrangements. Please give your warm support as he makes his proposal, the pilot continued. Then I stood up and took a ring out of my pocket. Then I put my knees on the floor and looked up at Emma. Emma covered her mouth with her hands, looking at me. Emma, I know I'm like this, but I want to be with you forever. Will you marry me? All the passengers were watching us intently. Emma, blushing, looked at me. Will she say yes? I felt nervous. Then Emma, teary-eyed, said, yes. I'd be delighted. She took the ring. I couldn't help but embraced her. The surrounding passengers cheered and congratulated us. And so, we became officially engaged. We enjoyed our time together on the vacation. After the trip, I had to return to my job in another country. The joyous time flew by. After the trip, I reluctantly returned to work out of country. Later, I was informed that thanks to the precise emergency resuscitation, Michelle was able to be discharged from the hospital immediately. I got a message from Michelle apologizing and thanking me. I was truly glad Michelle survived. Sophie, I heard, quit nursing and started studying nail art. She told everyone that it was thanks to me that she could follow her desired path. Emma told me that she had been spending more time with Sophie and Michelle, growing closer as friends. Emma happily told me about it. Time passed, and a year went by. How do you like being back in DC? Jet lag is tough, but I still love DC. Jake grinned at me. It's because Emma is here with you, right? I felt my face turn red. I decided to quit my job out of country and work at Jake's hospital. Sorry to keep you waiting. I was looking at baby clothes with Michelle and lost track of time. That's because Sophie wanted to buy everything. Sophie and Michelle cheerfully entered the cafe. How's the baby doing? Great. And it's a girl. Sophie, Michelle, and Jake exchanged happy looks. Yes, Emma and I got married right after returning from our vacation trip. And now, Emma is carrying our child. That's why I decided to move back to DC. Alex, you're finally going to be a dad. And a girl, no less. Unbelievable. Jake smiled at me. It's all thanks to you inviting me to the party to celebrate our entering 30s. Just then, Emma came in late. Sorry, I'm late. Everyone burst into laughter seeing Emma all sweaty. I look forward to enjoying my one and only life surrounded by the people I love.